A quiet street. Flashing lights. A suspect in cuffs. A police dog that will not stop whining. The case should have ended there, but Rocco kept staring at one pocket. Every time the suspect moved, the dog trembled like he knew something buried deeper than guilt. The officers brushed it off. Routine, procedure, until someone replayed the store camera. Grainy footage, a shadow behind the shelves. And for 2 missing minutes, the truth slipped right past them. What that camera captured would tear through every assumption. It was not about theft, it was about something lost, something waiting to be found, because when the silence finally broke, every eye turned toward the only one who had sensed it all from the start. The K9 who refused to look away. But what they found next, no one was ready for. The next minute changes everything. But before it starts, tell me what you think the dog sensed first. The sirens had already faded when the dog began to whine. The street outside the small grocery store was sealed with yellow tape, and the suspect sat on the curb, wrists locked in steel. The officers around him had started to relax, but the K9, a seasoned German shepherd named Rocco, would not calm down. He was trained to obey silence after an arrest. Yet his low, drawn-out whine kept cutting through the night air like something left unfinished. One officer tried to pull him back toward the cruiser, but Rocco resisted, eyes fixed on the suspect's hands. The man stared at the ground, unmoving, expression hollow. The scene should have ended there, routine, procedural, clean. But nothing about Rocco's body language felt routine. His ears flicked once, then locked forward. His tail stayed rigid. He pressed his muzzle against the suspect's sleeve as if searching for something more than scent. Why was a trained K9 acting like he had missed something crucial? Here is the full story. But before we jump in, one click can change everything for you here. Hit like, subscribe, and let us see how deep this story really goes. The lights from the patrol cars pulsed red and blue across the suspect's face. The store window reflected the scene like a broken mirror. Officers, handcuffs, and the faint outline of Rocco's shadow stretching long across the asphalt. The suspect's name was Mark Dalton, a petty thief with no violent record. Yet Rocco was not showing aggression. It was something else, an unease that carried weight. The kind of sound dogs make when they sense pain instead of threat. The night air was heavy with static. The smell of motor oil and spilled milk from the store floor hung thick. Rocco suddenly pawed at the suspect's jacket pocket. The man flinched slightly, and an officer stepped in, pulling the fabric open. Inside was only a folded paper, damp and smudged, a grocery receipt, nothing else. Still, Rocco's nose stayed there, trembling. His body went still in that frozen half-crouch every handler recognizes, the moment when instinct locks onto something the eyes cannot see. For a brief second, the handler thought about calling Rocco off, but he did not. The dog's entire frame was vibrating with certainty, and years of partnership had taught him never to ignore that. The streetlight flickered once, and the suspect finally looked up. His eyes did not carry fear, they carried exhaustion, almost like surrender. Rocco sat again, quietly now, gaze locked on the same pocket. A soft gust of wind rattled the police tape. The handler's breath clouded in front of him, unease tightening in his chest. There was something more here than a routine arrest, something just under the surface that none of them had seen yet. Then one of the younger officers noticed the store's outdoor security camera light blinking red above the door, still recording, still active, still capturing what they had all missed. The footage was pulled within the hour. The suspect sat in the back of the cruiser, head bowed, while Rocco waited beside the patrol car door. The handler kept one hand on the dog's harness, feeling the faint tremor running through him. It was not fear, it was focus. Rocco's instincts had never been wrong in 5 years of service. Inside the precinct, the team gathered around the monitor. The grainy camera feed flickered to life, angled toward the grocery store's narrow aisles. At first, it showed nothing unusual. Mark Dalton browsing the shelves, a bag of bread in his hand. Then, a moment later, his movements changed. He stopped near the refrigerated section, froze for several seconds, then looked behind him. Something had pulled his attention off camera. The question was, what? Rocco's handler watched closely. He noticed the timestamp, 9:42 p.m. The call came in at 9:44. Whatever happened in those 2 minutes was what Rocco had sensed afterward. As the footage rolled, a blur of motion appeared near the bottom corner. A small figure entering from the side door. A child, maybe 8 or 9 years old. The boy moved quickly, stepping behind a display to hide. Mark Dalton glanced toward him, panic flashing across his face. Then Dalton placed something in his jacket pocket before the boy ducked out of view. The officers exchanged glances. There had been no child at the scene. The store clerk had mentioned no one, and yet Rocco's whining had been centered on that pocket. What exactly had Dalton placed there? The handler paused the video. He leaned closer, studying the faint outline in Dalton's hand before it disappeared into the pocket. It looked like paper, creased, possibly folded more than once. The same paper Rocco had fixated on earlier. But if it was only a receipt, why was it hidden with such care? Outside the room, Rocco barked once, sharp and urgent. The handler stepped out. Rocco's gaze was fixed not on Dalton now, but on the desk where the folded receipt lay in an evidence bag. He pawed the metal drawer underneath, then looked back at his handler as if demanding something. The gesture was unmistakable. He wanted that paper open. The handler hesitated but complied. He lifted the evidence bag and unfolded the slip under the light. There was indeed a receipt, but behind it another piece of paper had been pressed tight against it, a drawing. Crumpled and faintly smudged, it showed a stick-figure man holding a dog's leash. Beside it, written in a child's hand, were 3 words, "Find my dad." The room fell silent. The name printed on the receipt matched the store address, but not the boy's last name. It was Dalton's, which meant the man sitting handcuffed outside was not just a thief. He was someone's father. The handler stepped back, pulse quickening. If that child was at the store during the incident, where was he now? And why had Dalton said nothing? Rocco shifted his weight, eyes darting toward the open doorway as if already tracing a path. His body lowered, muscles coiled. He was waiting for a command that never came. The handler realized Rocco was not reacting to a threat. He was tracking a scent he recognized. The child's. A new call came in from dispatch before anyone could move. A witness from a nearby alley had reported hearing a small cry during the commotion earlier. Just behind the store, Rocco's ears pricked at the word behind. The handler clipped the leash and followed the pull. The night air outside was colder now, sharper. Street lights flickered weakly over the cracked pavement. Rocco guided them past the dumpster, past the last strip of police tape, until he stopped near a stack of old crates. A faint sound carried through the alley, a muffled sob. Rocco pressed his nose toward the gap between the crates and whined low, the same sound he had made beside Dalton. The handler crouched, flashlight trembling slightly as the beam caught something small, shoelaces frayed and wet. The child had been there all along. The crates shifted with a hollow scrape as officers pulled them aside. Behind them, curled in a tight ball beneath a torn blanket, was the boy from the footage. His face was pale, streaked with dust, but his chest moved faintly with shallow breaths. The handler's pulse surged. Rocco crouched low, tail still, ears forward, watching with the intensity of a guardian who had already known this moment was coming. The boy stirred when Rocco stepped closer. His small hand lifted weakly, brushing the air as if he recognized the dog before even seeing him. The handler glanced toward the other officers. None spoke. They all sensed it, the unspoken connection between this injured child and the silent man handcuffed near the cruiser. The paramedics arrived fast. The boy was conscious but barely responding. He kept clutching something in his fist. The handler noticed Rocco's focus narrowing again on that closed hand. The boy would not let go until the paramedic gently pried it open. Inside was a metal badge, an old K9 training pin issued years ago to a handler named M. Dalton. The handler's throat tightened. It was no coincidence. Mark Dalton had once been part of their own department. His file came up within minutes. Injured during an operation, discharged on medical leave, records indicating a missing custody case involving his son after the separation. So why had he been stealing from the same store tonight? And why hide instead of asking for help? Rocco's gaze shifted between the boy and the direction of the cruiser. He whined softly again, as though connecting both scents, both sides of the same story. The handler followed his lead and walked back toward the patrol car. Dalton was still there, motionless, but his eyes lifted when he saw Rocco returning without aggression. The dog stopped in front of him and sat down quietly, the same way he had when the handcuffs first clicked shut. The handler felt the pieces beginning to align. The stolen goods had been nothing but bread and milk. No cash, no weapon. Dalton had not been trying to rob the store. He had been trying to reach someone inside. Inside the precinct later, the boy's condition stabilized. The doctor said dehydration and exhaustion, nothing permanent. But the child had not spoken a single word since arrival. He simply kept glancing toward the door whenever footsteps passed. The handler sat nearby, reviewing footage again, looking for the missing link. The store clerk had mentioned seeing Dalton earlier that week, pacing outside but never entering. The timing matched reports of the boy wandering the nearby area alone, sleeping rough after being separated from his guardian. A sudden noise broke the stillness. The flash of a crime scene camera reflected in the glass, illuminating the drawing still lying on the desk, the same one that said, "Find my dad." The handwriting matched the boy's medical file tag. The handler stood abruptly. It all fit. The theft, the silence, the paper. Dalton had returned to the store only because his son had been hiding there. He had not spoken out because he feared losing him again to the system. But one question remained. If the boy had been inside, how had he ended up behind those crates after Dalton's arrest? Rocco paced near the exit door, nose to the ground again. The handler followed. They retraced the path back toward the store's alley. The trail stopped abruptly near a side entrance where tire marks streaked across the dirt, fresh, narrow, like from a delivery van. It was not just a case of theft anymore. Someone else had moved the child before the officers arrived. Someone who had left in those 2 missing minutes of camera footage, just out of frame. The realization hit the handler hard. Dalton had not hidden the boy. He had been trying to protect him from whoever drove that van. Rocco barked once, sharp and urgent, breaking the silence of the alley. His body turned toward the dim edge of the street where a dark shape rested beneath a flickering streetlight, a parked vehicle matching the tread pattern in the dirt. The van had returned. The handler's breath caught as he moved closer to the van. The night had fallen completely silent, except for the faint hum of the street lamp above. Rocco's paws pressed against the pavement in slow, deliberate steps. His nose stayed low, moving side to side, tracing every scent line like reading a story written in dust. The van's rear door was slightly ajar. No movement inside, only the faint metallic creak as it swayed in the cold wind. The handler raised a hand to signal the nearby unit to hold. Rocco advanced on his own, body stiff but confident, the way only a dog certain of the outcome can move. When the door swung open, the beam of the flashlight revealed boxes, old delivery crates, a blanket, and a pile of photographs. Every one of them showed the same boy, different places, different months, some torn, some blurred. A few had Dalton in uniform standing in the background. Whoever owned this van had been following them for a long time. Among the boxes was a small leather pouch. Inside it, the handler found a badge, one belonging to a former security contractor fired months earlier for misconduct. His last recorded address was tied to a local distribution warehouse, the same company whose trucks matched the tire marks behind the store. Rocco suddenly barked twice and ran toward the street corner. The handler followed. A figure emerged from the shadows, running. The suspect tripped near the dumpster, and officers closed in fast. Within seconds, they had him cuffed. The man's wrist trembled as he muttered incoherently, but the evidence in the van spoke for him. Photos, tracking maps, and surveillance notes, all showing Dalton and his son over months. The truth unfolded quickly after that. Dalton had discovered he was being followed weeks earlier. He had gone into hiding, keeping his son near familiar places, hoping to outlast the threat. When he returned to the store that night, he was trying to retrieve food left earlier for the boy. But when the child was taken by the stalker hiding near the loading bay, Dalton's desperate chase had been mistaken for theft. And through it all, Rocco had sensed the missing link. He had known that pocket held more than a receipt. It carried a child's plea that no one else could read. The handler felt the weight of it as the van was towed away. Rocco stood beside the boy, now awake in the ambulance, his small hand resting on the dog's fur. The child's eyes followed Rocco with quiet trust, the kind that only forms when fear has finally met safety. Dalton sat on the curb once more, but this time without cuffs. The officers stood back, understanding the story now written in front of them, a father protecting his son, a dog revealing the truth hidden beneath assumptions. The precinct review cleared Dalton within hours. He was released under supervision, reunited with his boy, and offered support by the department. The stalker faced charges for abduction attempts and illegal surveillance. Weeks later, during a small ceremony at the K-9 unit field, Rocco sat proudly before the assembled officers. His handler placed the new medal on his collar, engraved simply with 2 words, "For knowing." As the applause faded, the handler looked out at the horizon beyond the training grounds. The sound of the wind carried softly through the pines. Rocco sat beside him, calm, eyes steady, every bit the silent sentinel he had always been. The case had started with a whine beside a handcuffed man and ended with a truth no one expected. It was not just about instinct, it was about understanding the weight of silence, the kind only a loyal dog could break. Rocco lifted his head as another call came in over the radio. A new case, a new signal, and somewhere inside that quiet, the handler already knew when the next mystery waited. Rocco would be the first to find it. Some stories never really end. They just fade into the quiet, leaving questions that keep you up at night. What the K-9 sensed that day might have saved more than one life, but maybe it also uncovered something none of them were ready to face. Stay close, because the next story might just change how you see loyalty forever.